Hey everyone, this is Don. In this episode of The Naturalist, I'm in Oregon to look at ecological restoration and some highlights from the temperate rainforest in this area, and with special attention to restoration for salmon. So let's go. Well, I'm here with a former colleague of mine from Wright State University who now lives in Oregon. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us where we are and what we're going to see today.
Thanks, Don. My name is Wayne Carmichael, and yes, I am a former colleague of Don's at Wright State University and also a longtime resident of Yellow Springs, Ohio, while I was at Wright State. What we are seeing today is a property that I purchased when I retired from Wright State in '93, and since then have moved to restore some of the original landscapes. This property is a good example. It's over 140 acres of temperate rainforest, much of which is in a riparian wet zone marshland, and it had been developed for cattle at the turn of the century and was abandoned for that purpose about the 1960s. So we had quite a bit of native vegetation that we could work with, plus we also had a lot of invasives that we had to deal with. This property has historically been what I call cattle ecology, in the sense that it was used for beef cattle for the timber industry, the logging industry for, of course, decades, and has since become a project to restore. So restoration to me meant removing invasive species as much as possible, also then planting trees, not just native firs and like hemlock and Doug fir and spruce, and but also shrubs. We have a lot of native shrubs that we're able to work with here. Elderberry, ninebark. There's some very nice Indian plum. There's willow. There's red dogwood. Some nice shrubs that you have to work with. And so that's been our project now since, for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. And I see that there still are some cattle on the property, correct?
Yes, as I mentioned, I say cattle ecology because we, unless we restore this quickly, we have to maintain cattle in order to sort of be able to work properly with what's left. So the focus has been to expand the wetland areas and restrict cattle access to the water sources, and manage the cattle properly, as well as expand the natural vegetation. So in order to expand that natural vegetation, we've had surveys, not only plant surveys done on the property to document what species we have to work with, but we also have had bird surveys to know exactly what kind of birds we had. The expansion of the wetlands that we've done has greatly expanded the ability for migrating waterfowl, and we have several dozen species of waterfowl, including diving ducks and dabbling ducks, and also eagles and osprey and herons. And since our project to restore some of this, we've seen significant expansions of those populations. In other words, they like it better here than they did before. And so that's been one of our key goals.
Well, why don't we get down closer to the action and look at some examples of some of the things that you've done here so far.
Yeah, let's start. We're going to go down. We have two big drainage areas here. We have about 1.5 miles of frontage on a coastal salmon river called the Nehalem, which is nice in the sense it has no dams, and it's been a coastal salmon and steelhead and lamprey river for ages, and that's part of the enhancement that we're doing. So the side streams that we've worked with here are coho spawning. They're not Chinook spawning. These streams are not big enough for Chinook, but certainly big enough for coho. So that was the key thing. And then along with that, the Fish and Wildlife people like to enhance for lamprey too. We have 3 native species of lamprey in the river, one of which was a freshwater lamprey and two of which migrate to the ocean and back. So then we have steelhead and we have coho salmon. There were stockings here of rainbow trout, but they don't do that anymore. So we're really out to enhance those native fisheries as much as possible. Along with that, we've gone out of our way to encourage beavers. We are beaver believers in that sense that we've had beavers, but the projects we've done has enhanced. So we've gone from maybe one beaver dam on the property to now we have 5 or 6. And so there's no question that the beaver have had their impacts here. Some of it we are a little bit unhappy with in the sense that they do kill quite a bit of trees, but that's all part of the habitat restoration. And they do have very nice dams which have helped manipulate and move and store water. And you often wonder, well, how do the fish move? Apparently coho have no problem going around dams, over the top of dams. And so it looks like they couldn't come, but they do. So
that was going to be my next question. So yeah. All right, well, let's get a little closer to the action and pick up from there. All right, well, we hopped in the gator. We headed out on Wayne's property to take a look at some of the early restoration efforts that were made on the property. Wayne, so what are we seeing here?
One of the things that we noticed when we bought this property was that a lot of invasives. And in fact, the spot we're standing on in the several acres at this sort of northwest corner of the property was a couple of meters deep in Himalayan blackberry. And one of the first things we set out to do is remove that and then start plantings. So what you see, which is kind of astonishing, these trees behind us, these trees are no more than 15 years old.
Oh, wow. It's amazing.
Here in this temperate rainforest, these Doug firs in particular will grow a meter a year. And that's pretty astounding because I have photos of these trees, of course, starting out as one-year plantings, which are, you know, not very tall.
Yeah, and I could see that this year's extension growth looks like over a meter from here. Yeah.
Right. And that's pretty much what we're seeing. So the ones up at this end are about 15 to 18 years old, and as we scan down the side here, these will be 4 or 5 years old. And one of the things we found here is that we have a lot of elk and deer, and these are the sort of the bigger elk that you find, not the Rocky Mountain elk, but the Roosevelt elk here on the West Coast. We have a standing herd on this property that we see on a regular basis about 2 or 3 times a week of 40 to 50.
Oh, wow.
And we'll have bull herds in here of a half dozen, which of course is what the neighbors like because elk hunting is a very popular event. But also as a consequence, we will plant 100 trees and we will lose 20 to 30% of them to elk and deer browsing. So one of the things over 15 years is we plant 200 or 300 trees, and then we go back and plant 200 or 300 more the next year, and maybe 100 of those would be replacing lost trees. And if we look closer down, you'll see that almost every tree here has had some sort of browsing and damage. And it's only till they get, several, 2 or 3 meters, 10 feet tall, that they're able to sort of withstand the browsing abuse. And maybe we'll see some of that further on down here.
Yeah.
So let's go have a look.
Okay. All right, now we've moved down to the waterway. And so tell us what we're going to see here, Wayne.
Okay, at this stop, what we're located now is at the lower end of the stream system that we've done a restoration project with. So we're now only a few hundred yards from where this drains into the Nehalem River, which is our salmon-bearing river here in the North Coast. What we see is a lot of water. Historically, this was always a wetland of sorts, but what we've done by relocating the stream is you can now see how extensive the water is. And this is with the first year's rain. This was totally dry until about 2 weeks ago. We've had bit over 10 inches of rain in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So our system is now filled up. And at the lower ends of this, we have 3 beaver dams down this way. In fact, if you listen close enough, you could hear the waterfalls on the beaver dam.
Yeah, I can hear that. I'm not sure if we'll hear that on the camera, but for sure.
And the new course of this waterway is right in the center. So there's actually a channel there, which is at this point is about 5 or 6 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the waterway that the coho adults have moved out of the main stem into the side stream, and they will go as far as they can. If there's 2 or 3 miles, if there's 3 or 4 miles, they'll go all the way. And of course, they're looking for gravel.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we did when our restoration came about, by relocating an older stream that had been moved for cattle purposes, put it back to its original course, we uncovered gravel-bearing rock for spawning, and they must have that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the restoration efforts have not centered on that. They've centered on restoring wetlands per se, but this project actually restored salmon-bearing spawning grounds,
Mm-hmm.
and that's significant. So even though salmon will move in a little ways, they were never able to spawn, and they didn't ever succeed. And so that's been one of the issues with salmon restoration in general, was convincing farmlands to manage their farmlands to create and enhance salmon spawning rivers and streams. So this side stream is pretty much strictly for, there are steelhead. We have the steelhead, the trout that move back and forth to the ocean, the coho salmon, the lampreys. They all now occupy this area a lot more than they ever did, along with beaver. And in fact, if you see here, quite a bit of this dead trees now is a consequence of the enhanced water and the enhanced beaver activity that we now see in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all part of restoring the
Right.
the native habitat.
Yeah, it's beavers are an interesting one. I have an episode on that or two, and they're a management issue in some cases, but they are a natural part of the ecosystem. So you have to, depending on what your goals are, either accept what they do, or in some cases places might choose to remove them or what have you. But obviously they're a natural part of the ecosystem here.
They've been a great benefit, and they are a great benefit of this entire system of temperate rainforest.
Now, are there salmon in that stream right now? If we were able to see them, would there be fish in there?
Yes, there will be coho moving into the system. It doesn't take long for it to fill up. Change the temperature, change the oxygen profiles. They're very good at sensing. And at this point, we have 3 years of spawning success. I can't tell you whether there are any returning yet, because typically it would be 4, 5, or 6 years before we should see any of the ones that originally spawned here and hatched and grew here, as opposed to others just moving in. But we do have salmon in here now. If we went down in there and looked seriously enough, and we would find them, yes.
So prior to this restoration, what did the salmon do? What choices did they have in this area?
Well, they had minimal choices. You had always had side streams. Up in the more forested areas now, where the trees are lumber and harvested, they had a little bit more, but those habitats are not as conducive. If you look at this, you'll see a lot more vegetation. The habitat here is a lot more conducive to growing fingerlings. Our fingerlings have been established here and looked at by Fish and Wildlife, are growing twice the rate of some of the streams that are higher up and have less vegetation to work with. Keep in mind that a yearly fingerling stays in here for 2 years. At second year, they smolt and undergo a physiological change on their vision and their ability to deal with salt water, and they don't move out of this system until the second winter. So fingerlings that were in here this summer are going to be in here until next year. The ones from last year are finally able to move out into the main stem and on down to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
The ocean, by the way, here is about 50 miles away.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep looking around at other parts of this restoration. Looks like it's working. So we've moved out some distance from the house, which is in the background now, down to the pond that we first looked at from the deck. So Wayne, what can we see in this spot?
Well, what we see here is a confluence of a smaller stream that we've always maintained as a pond that's right behind me. That has a smaller stream, and it connects to this lower stream here. And what you see in the water down from me, this is the confluence of the stream restoration that we've done. Mm-hmm. So this water is being held back into almost a lake, large pond, because of 3 beaver dams downstream before the main stem of the river. And so what is created here is a nice habitat for waterfowl. We have a couple of dozen different waterfowl species that breed here in the late, early spring, late winter, starting in February even. We'll have broods of a couple hundred ducklings out here at any given time, March and April. And you'll see a wood duck box in the background here. Right here. We have breeding wood ducks every year. So these existed before, but there's no question in the 3 or 4 years that we've now managed these water projects that instead of seeing a few dozen, we see several dozen. Mm-hmm. So I can't give you exact numbers, but this is what we have certainly made a difference on. So this water is all draining from the newly formed stream, which is about a half mile up, which we'll go to in a bit. And then across to the right over, you'll see the fir trees, and these are mostly Sitka spruce that we've planted along the riparian zone to the river. The plants in the background are poplar and alder, mm-hmm. and quite a number of others as well. Mm-hmm. So all of this has been part of the sort of restoration enhancement of what used to be a solid stand of evergreens in mm-hmm. this wetlands. Mm-hmm.
And right here we have a couple of those species up close that we've been referencing. So on the right, this is it's red alder, correct?
Yes.
Red alder, very common species out here. And on the left we have big-leafed maple. And I profiled this when I was in Washington this summer, along with vine maple. So here's the typical leaf of big leaf maple. You can see why it gets that name. And these are 2 common species out here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, with lots of lichen hanging from them because of the humid air, kind of a hallmark of the rainforest. Okay, let's move on. A couple more of our wetland indicator species are over here. So what do we have in this spot, Wayne?
Well, this is an interesting area that's always been, but this area back in here is pretty much impenetrable to walking. But it's part of the riparian zone that in the past was more dry than wet, and now it's more wet than dry. Mm-hmm. And you'll see a lot of the usnea, the old man's beard.
Yeah, the lichens. Mm-hmm.
Lichens, very spectacular, and those will get several feet long as they drape and grow and blow around. And then this dead tree right behind me here is one of the Oregon ash that's been girdled by beaver. Mm-hmm. The beaver are now active back in here. In fact, the beaver now have little mud holes right over here to my where my finger's pointing.
Yeah.
They can crawl back in there anytime. When we first bought this property, there was a big lodge right out in the middle of the pond. Mm-hmm. And the beaver kind of didn't do very well, and they abandoned that. And they've come back to build dams and then live more in the sides of the banks.
Mm-hmm. Like so bank lodges.
They'll have bank lodges that mm-hmm. you don't see from the surface mm-hmm. as much. So that's what we have back in here. There's red dogwood osier, there's Indian plum, there's ninebark, there's willow, a lot of willow, the ash, the maple, alder. So we have what's representative on this property of all of the major shrub and small tree and evergreen species that we have in this North Coast temperate forest.
And so these ashes, just to hit on them for a second, here they're in standing water, but that's not what killed them, correct? Because these things can tolerate standing water.
The big ash you see in the background, it has about a 4 or 5 foot diameter base, and that was alive until we started enhancing. And that one was not killed by beaver. The smaller ones have all been taken by the beaver, but that one just kind of naturally died. I don't know, age related, I guess. But it was spectacular. I was sorry to see it go. We have some smaller ones at the other end of the property, which are spectacular too, but this was clearly the biggest ash that we had.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's move along. Here's a nice view of the red osier dogwood with the red stems in the background. That's a wetland indicator. Pretty widespread distribution. And in front's a small shrub. This is called snowberry. This is a honeysuckle relative. And here are some of the fruits of snowberry. White, puffy fruits, but this is grown as an ornamental even back in Ohio, but it grows natively out here. All right, and there's a nice Oregon ash with seeds up there behind them. All right, we've moved upstream to take a look at the actual restoration or parts thereof, including what the stream bed used to look like in this area. So tell us what we're seeing here, Wayne.
Yeah, remember now, this stream was channelized to drain the fields at the turn of the century when the property was settled. And what we have done is blocked this old new stream and redirected it to its normal course, which was where we were before. And so what you're seeing here, this still acts as a kind of a fen or a backwater area, but there's no habitat in the bottom here. It's all shale and sort of clay.
Meaning no gravel.
Yeah, no gravel for spawning. So salmon could come up here, but there was no incentive to stay, and so that's what we were working with. So what you're seeing here is a good example of invasive Himalayan blackberry, which we're also part of trying to remediate and remove, and then seeing some of the alder that established itself as over the 100 years that this was the stream course. And it's fairly deep down there. It channelized probably 15 to 20 feet further down, and it still connects to the river and still receives backwater from the river or rainwater. And what we're seeing here is a culvert which we put in to maintain access to the fields, because again, until we can restore the entire property, we still have cattle here on this property. So this is the old stream bed. So this would be Old Tweedle Creek. It still harbors a lot of, frogs and salamanders and critters like that, but it doesn't have any fish in it anymore.
Okay. So in any sort of ecological restoration, there is usually planting involved. You get rid of the bad stuff and you try to bring back the good stuff. So Wayne's going to talk to us a little bit about what's been done in this particular area in terms of restoration of native trees and shrubs.
Right, so in this sort of east end part of the property, this is where much of the actual restoration, construction, removal was done. So looking out at what Don just showed you, doesn't look like, but 2 years ago this was bare ground. And we removed, greater than 20,000 cubic yards to create this new old channel, which now connects to the pond and beyond where we were before. So in here, you're seeing some invasives, but you're seeing natives, and so we're trying to enhance for these natives. So there's another ash in front of us here. One of the things I really wanted to point out, one of the things we like to establish are willows, which are really good for establishing riparian zones here. And behind me here, this is a willow stand, which this time of year, not so much. But if you look closely at the ground, you'll see these twigs that break off from the willow as it ages and loses its leaves. Each one of these can become a new plant. See how it broke off? This was natural breaking. And if it lands and manages to stick into the ground in any way of shape or form, that will grow into a new willow. And we've gone out of our way to take these stabbings and create willow stands up and down the system. And they do very well. Within the first year, that will root itself, form new buds, and expand. So we've tried to enhance that a lot, as well as the alder and the ash. Those are the things we'd like to focus on. And again, in the background, we've tried to remove these Himalayan blackberries and the canary grass, of which you see mostly the grass here. And hopefully, as we get over time, replace it with these sedges, the soft bulrush, which is doing a nice job of coming back in wherever it can and slowly displacing the invasive grasses. We have a lot of native grasses here, timothies and things like that, but they were displaced a lot by the canary grass, which is a very aggressive root system, which makes it very difficult to remove completely. You can mow it, but the roots are 18, 24 inches down, and you really have to dig out the top foot or two to actually physically remove and then reestablish anything else. So that's an expensive, slow process, but inevitably, sooner or later, 50 years from now, we might have the place we want. And of course, the hillside behind you here too, this was an established stand of alder, which was a commercial timber out here, a very good hardwood. And so we did harvest that alder as it was getting too old and starting to break apart. And so now we're reestablishing this hillside with Doug fir and hemlock and red cedar and Sitka spruce, more of those kinds of trees which were here before. So that's kind of what we've done here. The actual excavation project ended a couple hundred yards up here, and then naturally moved into the wetland area that we were at before, down by the pond. So we didn't do anything there. We've sort of let nature go take its course and create more wetland area. And there is believe it or not, there's a course that the salmon move right through here. So right now, even though it doesn't look like it, there's a course out here in this grassy area that's several feet deep and only 2 or 3 yards, maybe 10 yards across, and the salmon are moving through there, the coho, to find a suitable spot for spawning.
And how large are coho?
Well, they can be up to 15, 20 pounds, but this typical size is 9, 10, 11 pounds. So they're a bit smaller than the Chinook, which of course can get twice that big, but they're certainly a very, a commercial fish that's very much in demand, and is the fish that has been sort of declared in danger along with Chinook and other salmon species. But it's really the coho that drove the monies to allow this project to proceed, because they're the ones that come into the smaller side streams. The Chinook stays in the main stem because they need more space and bigger rocks and areas for their sheds. And this area, the coho don't need quite the elaborate gravel areas that the bigger fish do. So we have that here. We'll see a bit more of it when we go back down to the other end. So I'm going to wait and discuss that a little bit more down there.
Sure. You also pointed out that there was, during the reconstruction process here, an Eagles landing installed over there or left behind over there. What's over there?
Well, the contractor who does these kinds of projects and very much likes them, he had a leftover pole that he was going to use for a turtle pole and just lay it in the stream, and then he decided no, he needed an eagle's roost. So it's called an eyrie, and he said, well, this will attract you. But we have eagles here. In fact, we could have seen one today for all that need. And I haven't really seen eagles on there. I have seen an osprey on there, but what has come to occupy it more than anything else are the great blue herons.
Ah, yeah.
Great blue herons love it. And since we got more water in the system, instead of having one or two that sort of stay here summer and even in the winter, we now have half a dozen that are pretty much permanent residents here. Again, we could very well, in fact, I saw one this morning when we were down at the other end.
All right, so let's go and get a little closer look at the stream itself and talk about the actual construction process. All right, well, we're now getting up close and personal, the actual stream itself, and boy, if we're going to see any salmon today, this would be the place to see them, but chances are probably pretty low of that. They might be in there, but if they're tough to see. So where are we now, Wayne? And tell us what was done here exactly to do this.
Okay, prior to the project, this was all blackberry and invasives. And we moved about, as I mentioned earlier, a little over 20,000 cubic yards to channelize this. It doesn't look like much, but it's about 3 or 4 feet deep in spots, about 10, 15 feet wide. It still has a lot of the grasses in there that we would prefer not to see, but along with that are a lot of good natives that are coming back in too, native macrophytes and aquatics. And those make really nice food for the fingerlings and the smolts. And as I said, they grow very well in here. The actual gravel beds for this could be spots anywhere in here. They don't have to be large. The reds, which are the spots where they do the actual spawning, only need to be a couple, 2 or 3 feet, and just some nice sized gravel.
That's REDD, correct?
Yes,
Reds?
yeah, reds. And the better gravels are up at the other end, and perhaps even beyond the bridge and further up, because this stream does go up into the hill for another mile or two for its headwaters.
Mm-hmm.
So the stream itself is only about 2 miles long,
mm-hmm.
And then it goes into the main stem. So I couldn't begin to tell you how many adult salmon have to make it in here to provide the numbers of fry that we see. We see the fry after they've hatched visibly about late April, early into May.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere in here you'll see literally hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And since you know that an adult would probably have a few thousand eggs, it wouldn't take very many adults to give you thousands of fry, but of course the survival rates are low percentages after
mm-hmm.
the whole process. But
mm-hmm.
They're in here. I have literally seen in this stretch here an adult last year.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely difficult to see because they're colored on top. They look very much like the shade of the water,
mm-hmm.
but you can see them in here, and they certainly are in here. But whether there are half a dozen or a dozen or 2 dozen, I couldn't say. I would
mm-hmm.
say it doesn't take many. Probably half a dozen pairs that manage to spawn in here is probably enough to populate this stream, because literally there are hundreds of these streams on this Nehalem River, which itself is only about 120, 130 miles long.
So as you said earlier, I think that it'll take then those fry 4, 5, 6 years to be mating again?
To return, that's
to return
correct.
and
Yeah.
mate
The fry
and
are
lay
in
eggs.
here,
Okay.
they go from about a half an inch. By the end of the summer, they'll be 2 or 3 inches in size.
Mm-hmm.
Then they overwinter, and then the next summer they'll turn into smolts, and they'll be maybe 4 or 5 inches, and they'll have an enlarged head and large eyes. And then they're the ones that go down to the mainstem onto the ocean, and 4 or 5 years, 5, 6 years, they will return
mm-hmm.
and hopefully come back to the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And in the interim, any salmon could be coming in here. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same one that can target the same stream
right.
that it was hatched in, but that's how the system tends to work. So
mm-hmm.
it is a few years, and of course during that time, 10,000 fingerlings could
mm-hmm.
literally be a few dozen that actually come back as adults.
Right.
Because there's a lot happens when it
goes
here and
a lot of mortality.
goes to the ocean.
Yeah. So show us here now where the excavation process itself, what was done and what are the results?
Well, again, this was all flat, and the idea was to take it down, well, for 2 things. We had to take it down for elevation so that you had the right flow elevation. So from the bridge up here to the end of our project for the excavation, which is a little under 2,000 feet,
mm-hmm.
We dropped only about 5 or 6 feet from up there to down here to
mm-hmm.
maintain the elevation.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, the other task was to get down to the point where we could see some of the old riverbed. keep in mind that this entire valley is an old riverbed. And if you go deep enough, you're going to find river gravel, which is what's needed. And in the interim, of course, in 100 years, you've had a buildup here of sediments and organics and some inorganics. So the idea was to come down and expose as much of that as we could, but maintain the elevation drops that we needed. And so during that whole process is what we now see. So again, 3 years ago, this would have been bare soil. It's now coming back. It's not coming back with everything you would like, but with the proper encouragement, it's coming back with some things that make the habitat what's needed to enhance the system for fish and lamprey and other things too. I mean, a lot of ducks swim in here too now. They come in here where they didn't before. Heron are in this stream all the time, you know, looking for frogs
Salmon.
and salmon and frogs and small newts and of course aquatics. We now have, since we opened the system, we now have the crayfish that have come back in here now too, which is and so, you know, things like that too.
Well,
which
that
we didn't
sounds
have
like
before, so.
sounds like a tremendous success. A lot of work, but it's really impressive to bring this kind of nature back to a previously, well, somewhat degraded habitat. It's awesome.
Another thing you might notice here, we had some students come in and do these stabbings. These are willow stabs where you literally take a piece of branch. Last winter they came in and planted several thousands of these, and you can see they've come back and sprouted and established themselves within just a few months. There's this one here, there's one right in front of you, they're gone. Of course it's wintertime now, they don't look the best. But you see these.
But they're there, they're established for sure.
So we've had students, forestry students come in. They come in for the day and have a lunch and get wet, usually. They like to fall in the water and fool around. But then in the process, they planted several thousand of these little stabs along here. And they do very well. We'll get 70 to 80% success. Now, further up is a good example, though. When they got a little bit bigger, beaver like snacks too, so they came in at one point and stripped out a couple hundred of these saplings as well. So again, we plant, they get eaten, we replant. Sooner or later they get big enough to maintain themselves.
All right, in this particular stretch we are in prime salmon spawning grounds. So what are we seeing here, Wayne?
Okay, now we're at the the origins of where we removed the old stream or plugged it and started the new stream. You can see the bridge behind us. That's the starting point. You see the big alder stand. And the first thing you might see is that we're surrounded now by literally hundreds of small alders. Those have all seeded in from those adult alders in 2 years.
Wow.
Literally hundreds of them have seeded in here. And then the stream below us, this is some of the deeper spots that was excavated. Again, you can see the normal level of the land. So bringing this down to this level so we had the right flow for the excavation. But also in here, if the light's just right, you'll see gravel at the bottom of this. This is prime spot for them to spawn. And this is where I gauge where to see the fry in the spring in April, May. There'll literally be hundreds of them in here. And also what's nice is that you see some soft bulrush that's moved back in. This is all natural reestablishment. The other thing we can't see quite as much is that there was some very nice aquatic macrophytes that came back in along with some algae. All of that creates good habitat, excellent habitat for the young fry.
And for Rocco.
And for Rocco, who is my primary person who goes and does the inspections of the water.
Do you have muskrats in these drainages as well?
We do. We had muskrats in the pond. I've never seen them up here. I'm sure we have them. Of course, we have invasive nutria too, but that's more in the valley. I don't think they ever made it over this far in terms of invasives. But of course, we have beaver that's working through here all the time too. In fact, this winter at some point they'll probably come in and chew down a lot of these alder saplings for some snacks. And so we do have that. But what we're hoping to see here is just actually faster than I even might have imagined, that things have reestablished themselves, because we did none of these plantings. This was bare soil, just down to the rock, the river rock gravel base. We have done small plantings of the evergreens, but everything else is natural or stabbings that we've done over the last year or two. So very much this is where you would see adults swimming through. Obviously.
Well, something you didn't have to plant then are these big guys in the back here. So let's walk up and take a look at those, talk about those.
An interesting historical perspective here was this was major logging. For 100 years now this was logged. Initially without roads, it was just with railway. But all of the big timber, the Doug fir, the hemlock, and especially the red cedar was removed pretty much. But for some reason, I'm still not ever getting a good reason why, the big Sitka spruce was not a good commercial timber. And so these are some of the native primary Sitka spruce, which would be in these cases about 400 years old. And this little stand in here of about 9 or 10 of them is what we sort of pushed the dirt up against and created a little grove. So this is kind of our spruce grove.
Sure. Let's get closer to one of the trunks, just to get an idea of the scale. In fact, I'll have you try to stand by that thing if we can. Well, maybe we can get close to it here.
Well, I can move right back in here and stand.
I've always got to get big trees on my episodes, so here's my homage to that.
So, yeah, here's our spruce. This is one of the bigger ones we have. Of course, the diameter of this base here would be probably 10 feet, 12 feet.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like to me. Another monster behind it.
It's a very sinewy wood. I think part of the reason why it wasn't commercially done is that it doesn't split easily to make nice boards. You have to cut it, and then there's often sinew in it. Sinew meaning sort of twisty fibers. That makes it a little difficult to use, although it's a very strong wood, a very durable wood. But in the compromise to get wood that's easy to mill, I think these were left behind. Plus there's quite a bit of sap in these too. That makes it more difficult to process. But they're certainly a beautiful tree.
Sure. I think on behind in the understory too, this fern, this is this sword fern, correct, Wayne?
Yes.
Yeah. We looked at that in one of my episodes from Washington State, which is just up the coast.
Some more of your snowberry.
Yeah, and here's another close-up of snowberry.
This is an interesting one too. We have an awful lot of this. It's called salmonberry, which has nice little salmon-colored berries, which are quite nice to eat if you can get there before the squirrels get them.
Yeah.
We have a lot of this on the property as well.
Very cool. Yeah, this isn't a... Just stepping back to get into more of the grove feel. Once you get in here. Awesome. Well, that's going to conclude my episode from the property of Wayne Carmichael out here in Oregon. So I'd like to thank Wayne for his tour today, and certainly for the efforts that have been made out here. It's really impressive. It's a special thing to be able to bring salmon back to your own property. So thanks, Wayne, and we'll sign out.
Thank you, Don, for the opportunity. I enjoy doing this, not just because it's a success, and not just by my standards, but by all of the groups that we've been, I should say that getting to this point was a well over a decade process to get the appropriate funds together. This entire project was a little over $300,000. We were supported a lot by a Salmon Foundation through actually NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration monies, and some Fish and Wildlife, state Fish and Wildlife, federal Fish and Wildlife, and in here in Oregon we have from the monies from the state, from this lottery program that we have, is OWEB. So those are the funding agencies, as well as personal funds from us as well. So thanks again. Hope you'd enjoy it.
Okay, take care. See you next time.